battleship was too big for the harbor. From the air, it looked wrong, like someone had dropped a skyscraper on its side into a shallow bay. The gray hull filled the water, its bow stabbing toward the open sea, its stern almost brushing the shoreline. On the morning of April 6, 1945, in Okinawa, Japan, men on small fishing boats looked up at the giant and felt two things at once: pride and dread. The ship was Yamato. 70,000 tons of steel, 9 18.1-inch guns, the largest naval guns ever mounted on a warship. A floating symbol of an empire that had once believed it could dominate the Pacific through sheer will and steel. Now, as fuel hoses snaked across the dock and trucks rumbled back and forth, men whispered a different name for what was about to happen. A Toko mission, a suicide operation, a one-way trip. Somewhere on shore, an officer read the orders again, lips moving silently. Yamato and her small escort force were to sail south. They would have just enough fuel to get to Okinawa, not enough to return. They would beach themselves near the American invasion fleet. They would fight as a stationary fortress until they were destroyed. It was, in theory, the ultimate expression of Japanese fighting spirit. In reality, it was a decision made by desperate men in a collapsing war, a plan that treated a super-battleship and thousands of crewmen as if they were a single giant kamikaze plane. When Yamato's anchor chains rattled up, most of the men on board already knew what that meant. The greatest battleship ever built was sailing, to die. To understand how they got here, you have to rewind. Back to a time when Yamato wasn't a funeral procession waiting to move, but a secret project on the drawing board. Late 1930s, Japan is still formally at peace with the Western powers. The world is supposed to be governed by the Washington and London naval treaties, agreements that limit the size and number of battleships each major navy can build. Japan signed those treaties. It also resents them. Japanese naval officers, raised on stories of their victory over Russia at Tsushima in 1905, feel boxed in by tonnage limits and gun calibers imposed by Western powers. To them, it's insulting. Why should Britain and the United States be allowed bigger fleets? So quietly, in design bureau and shipyards, they begin to cheat. They draw up a ship that is supposed to fit treaty limits on paper. On paper. In reality, the design balloons. More armor, more guns, more range, more everything. What emerges from those plans is a monster, displacement far above the allowed limit. Main guns of 46 centimeters, 18.1 inches, and bigger than anything afloat. Armor thick enough, in theory, to shrug off any known shell. The idea is simple and very Japanese in its faith in quality over quantity. If we cannot match American numbers, we will outclass them. We will build one ship that can take on many. A super-battleship, a floating fortress. Her name will be Yamato, after the ancient name for Japan itself. She will be the empire in steel. Building her is a national effort. At Kure Naval Arsenal, one of Japan's main shipyards, huge gantries rise. Workers toil day and night. Massive steel plates are riveted and welded. The slipway is screened off to hide her size from prying foreign eyes and overhead reconnaissance. Her keel is laid in 1937. She slides down the ways in 1940. In December 1941, as Japanese aircraft roar over Pearl Harbor, Yamato is still so new that her paint is barely dry. She serves as an admiral's flagship. She sails with the fleet. But here's the irony. For most of her career, Yamato doesn't do very much. She's too precious, too slow to react to fast-moving carrier battles, too hungry for fuel in a navy already starved of oil. At Midway, where naval air power proves once and for all that carriers, not battleships, are now the queens of the sea, Yamato is there. But she never fires a shot. She sails in distant support, watching smoke on the horizon, listening to radio reports of disaster as 4 Japanese carriers burn and sink. She was built for a Tsushima-style slugfest. The war has moved on. The age of the battleship dies, and Yamato hasn't even had her big day yet. Fast forward. The war that was supposed to be short and decisive has become a long, grinding catastrophe for Japan. American industry is awake. Carriers roll off the slipways, destroyers, cruisers, submarines, all in numbers no Japanese planner had truly understood were possible. American submarines have shredded Japan's merchant fleet. Fuel is scarce. Planes are scarce. Experienced pilots are almost gone. Everywhere, Japan is on the back foot. On land, they lose island after island. Tarawa, Saipan, Guam, Peleliu, Leyte. At sea, the Battle of the Philippine Sea turns into the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, where Japanese naval aviation is slaughtered. Yamato finally sees real combat at Leyte Gulf in October 1944, blasting away at American escort carriers and destroyers in the battle off Samar. Her guns devastate anything they hit, but in the end, the Japanese fleet is beaten back by American air power, torpedoes, and the sheer ferocity of small U.S. ships that refuse to die. Japan's last serious fleet action ends in retreat. By early 1945, the Imperial Japanese Navy is shattered. What's left of it hugs the coast, hiding from carriers, short on oil and hope. Then the Americans come for Okinawa. Okinawa is different. It isn't a small reef or jungle island far away. It's practically on Japan's doorstep. From Okinawa, American bombers can hit Kyushu and Honshu easily. It is, in Japanese eyes, the last barrier before the home islands themselves. The Americans arrive in force. Carriers fill the sea. Transports land Marines and soldiers on the beaches. Artillery, tanks, and flamethrowers begin the slow killing match with Japanese defenders dug into caves and bunkers. For Japanese leaders in Tokyo, it feels like the last act. The atmosphere in meetings is tense, sometimes hysterical. Conventional strategy has failed. The army has been pushed back across the Pacific. The Navy is a ghost. The Air Force is running out of trained pilots. So they reach for something else. Death as a weapon. Kamikaze attacks. Suicide pilots crashing aircraft into American ships begin in late 1944. By the time of Okinawa, they are a major part of Japanese defense plans. Young men, some barely out of school, are given just enough training to take off and aim. They write farewell letters, tie hachimaki headbands, fly into walls of anti-aircraft fire. Some hit, some are shot down, all die. In this climate, in this mindset, a new idea emerges in the Naval General Staff. If planes can be kamikaze, so why not a battleship? The plan is drawn up under the title Operation Ten-ichi-gō. Heavenly Operation Number 1. On paper, it's simple. Yamato, light cruiser Yahagi, and a small screen of destroyers will sail from Japan to Okinawa. They will have no air cover. They will not wait for the perfect moment. They will not try to dodge American forces. They will head straight into the American invasion fleet like a battering ram. The Yamato will beach herself in shallow water off Okinawa. Her main guns will fire like a land battery until she is destroyed. Her escorts will fight until they sink. The operation is, by design, one way. There is not enough fuel allocated for a return voyage. The planners know this. They accept it. They dress it up as noble sacrifice. To die gloriously for the emperor, for the nation. But behind that rhetoric is something colder. The recognition that Japan has almost nothing left and is willing to spend the last of it on a gesture. Some senior Navy officers argue against it. They point out the obvious. American carriers roam the seas around Okinawa. U.S. air power can find and sink ships far from the island. Without air cover, Yamato will be a giant target. Fuel itself is precious. Burning it on a suicide run may be worse than keeping the ship in reserve. They lose the argument. The decision is made. Orders go out. Yamato will sail. On board the ship, officers gather in wardrooms. Some read the orders in full. Others get the cleaned-up version. But sailors aren't stupid. Rumors spread through the compartments and gun decks, through the engine rooms and mess halls. We're going to Okinawa. They say there's no fuel to come back. They want us to beach the ship and become a fortress. Fortress? More like a coffin. Different men react differently. Some embrace it. They've grown up in a culture that glorifies self-sacrifice. They've seen comrades die in hopeless banzai charges. They've heard broadcasts praising Kamikaze pilots as heroes. Dying on Yamato for them is a chance to join that pantheon. Others feel anger. They've trained for years. They've survived battles. They've watched friends die in explosions and fires. And now, they're being ordered to sail into a slaughter that any sane person can see coming. In the engine rooms, machinists run their hands over turbines and valves and talk quietly. In the turrets, gunners clean the great guns one more time, even though deep down they know those barrels will probably never hit a single American ship. Yamato is so big that experiences differ by deck. One man in an upper compartment can see the sky. Another deep below has no idea what it looks like outside beyond the color of the electric lamps. They all hear the same thing when the sirens and whistles blow on April 6th. It's time. Early afternoon, April 6, 1945, fuel hoses are disconnected. Dock workers coil lines. Ships' whistles echo. Tugs nudge the battleship away from the pier. From shore, Yamato's bulk slides slowly into deep water like a mountain going to sea. Families of some crew members watch from the dock or nearby hills. Some wave flags, some just watch in silence. Most will never see that silhouette again. On the bridge, the captain, Rear Admiral Seiichi-ito, stands with his officers. He's a serious man, not given to theatrics. He knows the odds. He initially opposed the operation. He's carrying it out anyway, because that's what he's been ordered to do. Because duty in his world is a cage. In the fire room, stokers sweat as they feed the hungry boilers. Steam pressure rises, shafts turn. Yamato's enormous propellers churn the water. She heads out, escorted by Yahagi and 8 destroyers into the inland sea, then toward the open Pacific. The operation is supposed to be secret. It isn't. Allied bombers and reconnaissance planes have been watching Japanese movements for months. Radio traffic is monitored. Submarines patrol. By the time Yamato clears the straits and heads south, American intelligence already has a pretty good idea that something big is underway. Radar stations and scouts begin to look for her. It doesn't take long. You can't hide a ship that size for very long in open water. Morning, April 7th, south of Kyushu. The sea is choppy but not wild. Clouds drift overhead. Yamato plows forward, bow cutting through swells, spray flying over the forecastle. Up above, her radar antennae turn. Lookouts scan the horizon and sky. Everyone knows what is coming. They know about Okinawa. They know about American carriers. They know about kamikazes flying north to attack those ships. Now, for the first time, they are the ones without planes. They are the ones hoping, irrationally that perhaps not all the American aircraft are in the air. Perhaps some have gone home. Perhaps the weather will hide them. Perhaps. On the American side, there is no romance, just efficiency. Task Force 58, the main U.S. carrier striking force in the Pacific, gets the report. A large Japanese force, including a probable battleship, heading south. Admiral Raymond Spruance and his subordinates don't see anything noble or symbolic in Yamato anymore. They see a threat to the ships off Okinawa, a chance to remove one of Japan's last heavy units, a target. Orders go out. Planes are fueled. Bombs and torpedoes are loaded. Pilots gather in ready rooms. They're briefed quickly. You're going after a battleship, big one, probably Yamato. Heavy AA, some escorts. We'll hit her in waves. Torpedoes go low. Dive bombers aim for the bow and stern to jam the rudders. Fighters strafe and suppress flak. They don't talk about honor. They talk about angles of attack, speeds, altitudes, and rendezvous points. The carriers turn into the wind. Launch operations begin. On Yamato, mid-morning, someone spots a glint, a dot, then more dots. The alarm goes up. Bakusui, enemy aircraft. General quarters, battle stations, men run to their posts. Hatches slam shut, anti-aircraft gunners swing guns skyward. The great 18.1-inch main guns are useless against aircraft. They sit like silent monuments while the real fight unfolds above. From the ships, the incoming waves of American planes look like swarms of insects at first. Then as they get closer, their shapes resolve. Hellcat fighters, Helldiver dive bombers, Avenger torpedo planes. They come in groups coordinated from different directions. It's not one duel. It's a systematic killing. Yamato's AA guns open up. 25mm cannons chatter, 127mm dual-purpose guns thunder, shells burst in black puffs, tracer lines scratch the sky. Some American planes go down in flames, spiraling into the sea, but there are too many. And they keep coming. Imagine being on one of those AA mounts, the heat, the noise, your ears ringing even through ear protection, the barrel jerking in your hands as you track a speck crossing your field of view. You press the trigger. The gun chatters, empty casings spill out hot against your boots. You see a plane flash past, smoke trailing, and feel a moment of savage satisfaction. Then you realize there are 10 more behind it. Dive bombers peel off from high altitude, noses dropping, bomb bay doors open. They scream down almost vertically, the sea and the giant hull of Yamato rushing up to meet them. Pilots fight the urge to pull out too early. They wait until the last seconds. Release. Bombs fall. Some miss, throwing up great columns of water that crash down on decks and men. Some hit. When a 1,000-pound bomb hits a battleship's deck, it doesn't just explode. It bores through armor, or at least through upper layers, and detonates where it can do real harm. One bomb punches into the forward area near a turret, blowing apart compartments, starting fires. Another strikes near the bridge, killing men in the flag plot and communication spaces. Torpedo planes come in low, skimming just above the waves. They're aiming at the weakest part of any battleship, the underwater hull, especially near the midsection and machinery spaces. American pilots have been instructed to attack from both sides to avoid all the torpedoes hitting one side and simply rolling the ship. In the chaos, perfect coordination is impossible, but enough torpedoes find their mark. On Yamato's port side, a torpedo slams into the hull. The ship lurches, water rushes in. Damage control parties spring into action. Watertight doors slam, pumps whine. Men with shoring timbers and hoses race down corridors that are already ankle-deep in seawater. They've drilled for this. They're good at it. For a while, they keep up. Then another torpedo hits, and another, and a bomb, and another. The list grows. The first hits are survivable. Yamato is enormous. She can take punishment smaller ships would never endure. She heals over a few degrees, then rights herself as counter-flooding is ordered. Below decks, it's a different picture. In some compartments, lights go out. In others, steam pipes burst, scalding men alive. In the engine rooms, the noise is deafening. Machinery, shouted orders, the muffled thump of hits. Engineers fight to keep turbines turning even as vibrations change and alarms sting their ears. Somewhere in a passageway, a sailor opens a hatch and is met by a wall of water. He slams it shut, spins the wheel, and leans against it, panting, knowing that behind that steel there are men who now have no way out. On deck, fires spread. Hoses snake across steel. Firefighting teams crawl and scramble, some knocked flat by the concussion of nearby explosions. Of the escorting destroyers and cruisers, some are also hit badly. Yahagi takes torpedoes and bombs. She slows, then stops, then begins to list heavily. One by one, the escorts are crippled. Some will sink outright. Some will limply turn back toward Japan, trails of oil marking where they've been. Yamato, for now, keeps moving. Barely. Wave after wave of American aircraft attack. Each group arrives, lines up bombs and torpedoes, then pulls away to make room for the next. Pilots report hits over the radio, voices clipped, professional. They see the huge ship slowly beginning to lean to port more and more between attacks. Smoke pours from multiple wounds. Her wake curves oddly. Her speed drops. For the men inside, time becomes strange. Some sections of the ship go on fighting as if in a bubble, unaware of how bad things are elsewhere. Other sections are gone, cut off by fire, flooding, or simply destroyed. On the bridge, reports come in. Engine room number 2 flooded. Magazine sealed. Forward pumps out of action. It's getting worse on the port side, sir. The captain, Ito, listens. He's drenched in sweat. He knows what the readings mean. This isn't just damage, this is a death sentence. At some point, Yamato's rudder jams. She begins to turn in a slow, sickening circle, the maritime equivalent of a wounded animal staggering. She's no longer a ship moving with purpose. She's a dying leviathan turning its own wake into a swirl of oil and debris. Below decks, in the spaces nearest the hits, hell breaks loose. Water comes in like a fist. Men are thrown against bulkheads. Lights flicker and go. In the confusion, some panic. Most don't. They do what sailors everywhere do when their ship is hit. They try to save her. They haul hoses, they rig shoring. They carry wounded comrades past flames and falling debris. They close hatches they know may trap men on the other side. By now, the list is so severe that men are sliding across decks, grabbing at anything fixed. In gun turrets, shells roll in their racks. Some guns are knocked out entirely, barrels bent or mounts jammed. Others still fire stubbornly at dots in the sky that flash past like angry insects. An AA crew cheers as another American plane falls. Then one of their own magazines cooks off and the whole mount disappears in a flash. On the surrounding sea, wreckage spreads. Parachutes drift down. Some American pilots, some Japanese sailors thrown clear by explosions. Some will be rescued. Most won't. Sharks are always present in these waters. They don't care about flags. At a certain point, something in the ship's balance breaks. Too much water, too many hits, too little ability to compensate. Yamato's list increases rapidly. 10 degrees, 15, 20. It's one thing to walk on a deck tilted a few degrees. It's another when the world itself seems to be sliding out from under you. Equipment falls, men tumble. Loose shells careen down passageways. The order goes out. Abandon ship. It spreads patchily. Some hear it clearly. Others never get the message. Some choose to disobey, quietly by simply staying at their posts. On the bridge, officers take off their headsets. Some remove their gloves, straighten their uniforms, and prepare to die where they stand. Admiral Ito and some staff officers know the tradition. Captains go down with their ships. He has no intention of being an exception. On other parts of the ship, men rush to open decks. They throw life rafts into the water. Some jump, some climb down lines, others hesitate, looking back at the steel around them, the home they've lived in for months or years. In one compartment, a group of sailors crouch by an open hatch, staring at a roiling, oil-slick sea far below. "Go!" someone shouts. One leaps. A bomb or shell hits nearby. The next man never makes it to the edge. Then the end comes. One last bomb finds a magazine, or a fire eats through the last barrier, or a torpedo's shock does what gravity has been waiting to do. Inside the bowels of Yamato, propellant and shells that had not yet been used turn into a single massive detonation. The world goes white for a moment. Seen from American aircraft, it's a nightmare blossom. The center of the ship bulges outward. Steel plates rip. A column of smoke, flame, and debris shoots up thousands of feet, forming a mushroom-shaped cloud that surprises even veteran pilots. Some of them think for a second of an ammunition ship. They've never seen a battleship explode like that. The force of the blast tears Yamato open. Her back breaks. She rolls rapidly to port. Hundreds of men are flung into the sea. Others are crushed as compartments collapse. Some, trapped inside, know exactly what's happening and have no way out. In a matter of minutes, the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy, the emblem of a certain vision of war, disappears beneath the waves. All that remains is a patch of bubbling water, flames, oil, and debris, and thousands of human beings suddenly alone in a cold ocean. For the survivors, the next hours are a different kind of horror. The sea is choppy. Oil burns and slicks. Rafts are few, overloaded. Men cling to debris. Some have burns. Some are blinded by fuel. Some are wounded so badly they won't last long, but their bodies haven't realized it yet. The escorts that are still afloat, a few battered destroyers, turn to pick up as many men as they can. They cannot linger. American aircraft are still in the area. Any Japanese ship in sight is a target, so they steam through the debris field at speed, throwing lines, lowering nets, yelling, "Grab! Grab!" Some men manage to clutch rope or wood and be hauled aboard. Others slip under as the wake pulls them down. On deck, the rescued cough and retch up seawater and oil. They look back at the place where Yamato sank and see only smoke. Some cry. Some laugh hysterically. Most are too numb to feel much. Behind them, the sea begins to calm as if nothing had happened. The dead sink, many still inside twisted compartments. Yamato's guns will never fire again. Her shells, her tables, her bunks, her galley, all of it becomes a steel tomb. Back in Japan, the news is managed. The government does not announce. We sent our greatest battleship on a suicide run and it was destroyed before it reached its target. Instead, there are vague references to heavy fighting off Okinawa, hints of heroic sacrifice. Families of crewmen receive notices. Some are told their sons or husbands died gloriously in battle. Some hear nothing for months. In the years after the war, survivors of Yamato talk about their time aboard with a mixture of pride and bitterness. Pride in the ship. She was, by all accounts, a marvel of engineering. Her crew was well trained. They loved her in the way sailors often love their ships, as a home, a guardian, a personality. Bitterness at how she was used in the end, not as a weapon, but as a symbol. Not in a battle on anything like equal terms, but in a one-sided slaughter. For historians, Operation Ten-ichi-gō becomes a case study in everything that had gone wrong with Japanese strategy. The worship of sacrifice over pragmatism, the inability to admit that the era of the battleship was over, the readiness to throw away irreplaceable assets for gestures. It's a sad epilogue to a ship that had been designed, originally, to dominate. Instead, she becomes proof that in modern war, even the biggest gun means nothing if you cannot control the air. On the American side, the sinking of Yamato is, in the moment, just another operation. Pilots land on their carriers, hearts still racing, muscles aching. They write after-action reports. 2 near misses, 1 probable hit, heavy smoke observed. They get debriefed, eat, smoke, sleep. For some, the image of that huge explosion stays with them. The sight of tiny specks, men, dotting the sea. Years later, some will wonder about the faces on that ship. At the time, they don't have that luxury. There are still kamikazes diving on their own ships off Okinawa. There are still friends to lose. Executives and planners in Washington see it as one more step toward making an invasion of Japan, if it comes to that, less dangerous. One less battleship, one less myth. The US press reports the sinking with interest, the world's largest battleship destroyed. But even as readers absorb that, a different, darker project is already moving toward its own completion in the deserts of New Mexico. In a few months, something even more powerful than Yamato's magazine will be unleashed. The era of the battleship is not just over. The era of the planet's survival as a given is also over. Yamato's death is, in a way, the last grand gasp of industrial-era naval gigantism. After her, killing comes from the sky, from the atom, from stealth. Steel hulls that size will be built again, supercarriers, tankers. But never again will one ship be expected to turn the tide with her guns alone. Today, if you look at sonar scans of the seafloor south of Kyushu, you can see her. Yamato lies broken in two major pieces, twisted by the colossal force that tore her apart. Her bow section is upside down. Her superstructure is gone. Her turrets lie where they fell, still pointing in directions that no longer matter. Divers who have visited the wreck talk of eerie scenes, shoes still on racks, ceramic cups, wiring runs all frozen in place. They're careful when they go. For many in Japan, the wreck is a grave, not an artifact, a place where thousands died in a few minutes of unimaginable violence and confusion. On land, there's a museum in Kure where a huge model of Yamato dominates the floor. Visitors walk around it looking at the delicate work. The tiny anti-aircraft guns, the sleek hull, the massive turrets. Some are fascinated by the engineering, some by the story, some by the tragedy. Children peer up at the model and read plaques. Old men stand silently remembering. Some speak in hushed tones about waste. Others speak of honor. The ship means different things to different people now. But if you strip away the myths, the poetry, the nationalist narratives on all sides, Yamato's last sortie teaches something very simple. War doesn't care about symbols. The sea doesn't care what your ship is named. Physics doesn't care how big your guns are. If you send an asset into a battle space where the enemy holds all the cards, air superiority, radar, numbers, intelligence, your asset will die. No amount of rhetoric about spirit changes that. Japan's leaders by 1945 were so committed to the idea of noble sacrifice that they were willing to spend anything, planes, ships, human lives, on gestures they knew couldn't change the outcome. Sending Yamato to Okinawa was the largest of those gestures. It didn't save Okinawa. It didn't stop American bombardment. It didn't alter Japan's eventual surrender. It did kill around 3,000 of Japan's best-trained sailors in a single afternoon. And it removed forever from the sea a ship that, in another timeline, might have been preserved as a museum, a cautionary monument against hubris. Instead, she lies in pieces in the dark. Imagine just for a second being one of those young crewmen leaning on Yamato's rail the night before she sailed. You don't know all the politics. You don't know all the strategic arguments. You know your bunk, your post, the feel of the deck under your feet, the smell of paint and oil. You know your friends' faces. You know the way the ship's engines feel when she's at full speed, the low vibration in the soles of your feet. You look out at the water, at the dim shapes of mountains on the horizon, and you wonder if you'll ever see home again. Then you hear the announcements, the whistles. The engines ramp up. The shoreline begins to move slowly past. Distant figures on the dock get smaller, and you understand. Whatever else this is, it's the end of something. For your ship, for your navy, for your country as it has existed in your lifetime. You grip the rail a little tighter, then you let go, turn, and go back to your station. Because orders are orders. Because Yamato is moving. Because history sometimes doesn't give people choices that make any sense. It just kills their options one by one until only one path remains. For Yamato, that path led south into the teeth of carrier air groups and torpedo wakes, into a column of fire that reached the clouds. The day she sailed to die wasn't just the end of one ship. It was the moment the world saw, in the starkest possible way, that the old gods of naval power, big guns, thick armor, and steel pride, had been overthrown by something new. From then on, a battleship that went to sea without air cover wasn't a threat, it was a target. And in the waters south of Kyushu on April 7, 1945, the greatest battleship ever built proved that the hard way.